Fantastic. So good afternoon. My name is Kim Lehmann. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am an IT project manager at Princeton University Library. I'm also a product owner for Figgy and Digital PUL, known as DPUL, which are a couple of our library applications here. I know she'll be speaking with you all soon enough as well, but I'd like to briefly introduce my colleague, Ellen Ambrosone, who is the South Asian Studies librarian at Princeton, and who we have been lucky enough to work with on the initiatives that she'll be discussing in greater detail this afternoon. One of this year's successes for members of IT and project leads within the library has been finalizing workflows and application enhancements for ephemeral content from external contributors into our digital repository known as Figgy. As many of you probably know by now, Figgy is the home-built digital repository of Princeton University Library. As the main tool for digital content management, Figgy allows digital files to be ingested from local staging servers, such as our Digital Studio and Firestone Library, for example, Google Drive, or external hard drives. Okay, so great. We have digital images. What about the metadata for ephemera? Ephemera in Princeton University and the projects in Figgy work slightly differently than that of standard ingests of content into our repository that are typically synced with their associated metadata from ALMA, which is our new ILS, or finding aids by their unique bibliographic identifiers or component IDs. Ephemera items are described directly in Figgy and have some of the most advanced forms of metadata entry in the repository, including support for controlled vocabularies management, which is managed and added to by our ephemera stakeholders in collaboration with colleagues from cataloging and metadata services. In most cases, the item level metadata may be generated by a variety of internal and external contributors with the subject knowledge and language specialization necessary to responsibly describe the items that have been digitized. In my role as a project manager, I found that in many cases when one hears digital collection, digital project, digital initiative, there tends to be a focus partially, if not entirely, on the digitization of the physical object and the basic description of that object. On its surface, these processes may seem straightforward. You digitize the items in-house, you hand over digital files in some way to IT or imaging to ingest, or request external access to a selection of repository material in need of metadata enhancement. IT colleagues then ingest the content into Figgy or make specific repository projects available to an external party. And then somehow magically it becomes discoverable in one of our library's wonderful applications. What is not always apparent is the amount of cross-departmental collaborative work it takes both before and after ingesting contributions into Figgy, and the time it takes to create sustainable ways to streamline future requests for similar content. Digital initiatives like ephemera projects Ellen will be telling you a bit more about today are in fact about everything, from the selection, conservation, and prioritization of the materials to the metadata created or enhanced by contributors wherever they may be. Multilingual OCR, item level organization, structure, pagination, page labeling, enhanced cross-discoverability in our applications built and or implemented here at the library, and of course, the functionality and enhancement of those applications. This all contributes to our digital content in order to make more effective research tools and a better user experience for the growing number of those needing to work with or contribute materials to these applications. An excellent example of this would be the repository enhancements and workflows that were created to support multiple use cases presented by Ellen to us in the IT, Imaging, and Metadata Services Department, or items, which frankly is just a lot easier to say. Ellen's project needs required the joint collaborative work of IT, our digital imaging studio, Ellen as the library's primary stakeholder and subject specialist, and the external international collaborators contributing to the digital South Asian and Sri Lankan ephemeral projects that are either hosted or held by Princeton University Library. Thanks to Ellen's use cases and library developers, batch ingestion of metadata and images and CSV download of all ephemera project metadata into or out of Figgy is now possible for current and future external ephemera project collaborations. In order to create sustainable workflows that would handle bulk ingestion in this way for all ephemera projects when needed, the multi-step process, worked on in large part by our colleague Cliff Wolfman, took months to perfect, particularly for review and standardization of submitted metadata, mapping controlled vocabularies, and has involved a lot of time from IT, Ellen, and the external stakeholders themselves. In addition to this option, because of enhancements made to Figgy and the digital PUL application, a separate workflow was created to responsibly give project-specific access to external contributors in India and Sri Lanka, for example, who are now able to contribute, work with, and enhance digital content directly in both applications. Okay, so why the two workflows? Although working directly in our application within our platforms is an ideal option in most instances, establishing an alternative workflow that was not dependent on reliable access to stable internet connections or to allow flexibility if needing to accommodate for external metadata creation work already underway, for example, was important for us to ensure. There are and will always be edge cases that, for a variety of reasons, may complicate or hinder potential future collaborators' ability to contribute if we are unwilling to be agile in our own developing best practices and continuously building on what we learn from our users and stakeholders. To put it into perspective, in the context of Princeton University Library's mission, one of our own North Star statements reads, "We will meet patrons wherever they are and democratize access to knowledge as a core component of the library experience." What better way is there to do that than through digital collections and initiatives like the collaborative South Asian and Sri Lankan ephemera projects and the applications that make it possible in the first place? Prioritizing user-driven enhancements and workflows such as these means we'll be able to support future submissions of ephemeral content from all areas and will provide the sustainable foundations for best practices for this type of digital content in our repository. We're proud to have been able to respond to our wonderful stakeholders like Ellen, who ask, "Can you put this into Figgy? Can this work?" by saying, "Yes, we can do that," and working together to find new sustainable ways forward to do so. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with our colleagues and contributors and support the growing and diversifying repository needs of the Princeton University community. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to pass things along to my colleague, Ellen, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Hi, everybody. Give me just a sec so I can share screen. All right. Thank you, Kim, for such a wonderful first part of the presentation and for introducing me. Again, my name is Ellen Ambrosoni, and I'm the South Asian Studies Librarian at Princeton University Library. And today I'm going to share with you a bit about our growing collection of South Asian ephemera and some of the feature enhancements that Kim and I discussed with her team in order to work with collaborators in South Asia and to make the items in our collection as discoverable as possible. So the South Asian Ephemera Collection actually walks in the footsteps of the Latin American Ephemera Collection at Princeton. LAE, as we call these projects LAE and SAE, so I'll be using those names today too. So LAE launched about 6 years ago and has been building steadily ever since. And when I started at Princeton, I actually inherited the metadata schemata for LAE when we decided to pursue creating a collection of South Asian ephemera. And it didn't take long for me to figure out that SAE was going to pose new challenges that would require support from Kim and her team. So the central challenges that we've been thinking about over the last couple of years include creating ways for international collaborators to use Figgy, adding and/or adapting fields to accommodate original language scripts and facilitate discovery, and data extraction for internal and third-party use. So one of the biggest hurdles that we have with materials from South Asia, as you might imagine, is the sheer variety of languages that we have represented within the collection. And we want to represent that digitally as well in order to capture South Asia in all of its diversity. No one person can know all the languages in the collection. So very early on, we needed to find a way to make sure that materials in various languages would be processed and made discoverable. We decided to trial outsourcing metadata creation to a trusted vendor in India who regularly provides metadata records for physical items. To do so, I asked the items team whether we could provide our vendor with a login and credentials to work directly in Figgy. After a few conversations to sort out how we could do this securely so that the collection as a whole would remain safe while they worked on a limited subset of items, we were able to set them up with their own collection in Figgy where we could ingest items on a rolling basis and they could work directly within Figgy. Similarly, we recently collaborated with the American Institute of Lankan Studies, or IELTS, in Colombo, Sri Lanka, to make a collection of materials produced by radical activists from the 1960s to the 1990s available digitally. Our collaborators produced Google Sheets with the related metadata, and the items team worked to create a way to automatically ingest the metadata into Figgy, rather than having to manually enter the data for almost 600 items. As with lots of these projects, it took quite a bit of trial and error, and we learned a lot along the way. We now have a way to meet collaborators where they are, whether that means working directly in Figgy or ingesting spreadsheets. And Items has worked on a way to verify metadata before ingest to ensure that it will populate correctly in Figgy, thereby reducing the need for so much data entry by hand. Similarly, I've also worked with Kim and the developers to suggest feature enhancements that will allow users to search more intuitively for items from South Asia. For example, items in South Asian languages are described both by using the original language script for certain fields and in Roman script. Unfortunately, the Library of Congress romanization tables are often difficult for non-librarians to internalize and use when they're trying to find items in the catalog or within our digital collections. To try to mitigate this difficulty, I asked Items if they could create a keyword field where we could enter more intuitive ways of romanizing South Asian languages. And here I want to show you an example. So this is the homepage for the Dissidents collection. And one of the items that we have in here from the Women's Education and Research Center is a periodical called Pravahini. And what's special about Pravahini is that the creators actually made the conscious choice to publish that periodical. Sorry, guys, I can spell, I promise. To publish the serial in 3 languages. So it comes out in English, in Tamil, and in Sinhala. And this matters because the heart of this collection is really about resisting notions of rival ethno-nationalisms during this period in Sri Lanka. So if we take a look at the results that we get for the periodical, you can see in English, Pravahini spelled pretty intuitively. And here, if you look at number 5, let me just scroll to the top. This is in Sinhala, and again, still transliterated pretty much intuitively. But if we keep scrolling, scroll. And you can see if we look at number 24, which is in Tamil, even though we would pronounce the name of the periodical the same, this is Pravahini, it's romanized quite strangely. And so if someone searched in a more intuitive way, they would miss the fact that we have this publication in Tamil as well. So the keyword field is really critical in this regard because it allows us to bring all 3 aspects of this publication together in one search. So a little bit more about the keyword field. As time progressed, we also decided to allow our international collaborators to enter keywords in English in the field when they couldn't find an appropriate subject heading to describe an item. So this feature not only gave them more agency over how they describe the items in their own collection, but it also serves as an important diagnostic on our side. So now from time to time, we can actually audit the keyword field to see if we need to add a formal subject heading to our list of controlled vocabulary. So lastly, I want to mention another feature that Items created that has been an absolute game changer for South Asian materials, and that is the ability to extract the metadata from the collection into a CSV. So this feature was originally developed so that we could actually share the data from the Sri Lanka collection with the South Asia Open Archives, which is an open access repository of materials from South Asia. SAWA wanted to actually federate the discovery of the collection in their interface, and this was important on our side because it added another valuable layer of discoverability for the collection. So items created this functionality, which I've since used not only to share metadata with a third party like SAWA, but also for metadata cleanup projects for the rest of the collection. And this has been an unintended use for the feature, but also an incredibly valuable one as we work toward launching the broader South Asian Ephemera Collection, which will be going public very soon. To wrap up, I just want to say how incredibly rewarding it is to fail forward as we build these projects. I have absolutely relished my conversations with the items team, who are a group of curious, smart, and kind people who genuinely want to know what the challenges are for these materials and to find IT solutions so that we can represent these items well in our collections. Without being able to have this kind of exchange, it would make our collections far less varied and diverse, which I think we all know is not the best path forward. I often spend time dreaming about the kind of elasticity that I hope we can build into these systems over time so that we can remove barriers to collaboration and create digital collections that are meaningful to the communities represented within them. And I'm going to stop there and thank you again for listening.
Thank you both so much. This is fascinating. Excuse the cat meows in the background. It's lunchtime. Stopping to see if there's any questions. We'll give it a minute. There are a couple people typing. Just going to give them time. Looks like it's a lot of praise from your colleagues who are very happy to work with you. Give this one more minute. Okay, there's a question. I had a feeling one was coming. So this question is, the use of keyword to capture what isn't capturable using controlled vocabularies is a very real experience. What controlled vocabularies are you using for these ephemeral collections at this point?
Kim, do you mind if I sort of—
Not at all. Joanne.
Yeah, so the ephemera vocabulary is sort of inspired by the LC subject headings, but it doesn't map and correspond exactly. And that the sort of core list of subject headings was developed when they were focusing specifically on the Latin American Ephemera Collection. And so now that we have this new geography coming into play, we're finding that that there are even certain terms that maybe we wouldn't use in a South Asian context that are perfectly acceptable in a Latin American context. And so we're trying to figure out ways forward for how to deal with those shifts. But yeah, generally speaking, we like it to be inspired by LC, but they don't map exactly.
All right, we have another question. Did you vet the metadata for accuracy? Did you ever have to change anything that you felt was inaccurate?
I mean, generally speaking, the people describing these collections, they are like the community members that it means the most to them. And so if we made changes, like content-based changes to the metadata, it was something we did in collaboration with the IELTS folks who were creating the metadata. We did find, I mean, just romanization is so difficult. And we did find, you know, romanization errors and things like that along the way. But generally speaking, we didn't intervene on like how they wanted to actually describe the collection. It was more like formatting concerns and things like that. Am I right, Kim? Does that ring true?
Absolutely. And even the deep hole exhibit that Ellen showed to you as she was doing her search, none of that was published until individuals actually working in that in the unpublished back end. So our collaborators in Sri Lanka, for example, reviewed that content. And then I believe, yeah, we got a sign off for them and then we published it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Can I add one anecdote?
Oh, please.
And that is, I know nobody's asking a question, but this is important because we're talking about the keyword field. We really didn't know what would happen fully with that field. And, but Kim and I are explorers, I think. And the IELTS folks, when they created the metadata and they were able to use that keyword field, we had a meeting just maybe 4 months, I think, before the collection went live. And they actually asked us if in the results, like when you would search and you would get the results, if we could make the keyword field visible, but not the subject heading field, because they felt that their keywords were more important than the subject headings. And I think for Kim and I on the other side, like getting that kind of feedback from our collaborators was really like inspiring to keep going, that even though sometimes these features, they don't function perfectly or the way that you expect them to, they're meaningful, and you have to keep going and you have to receive that feedback and then keep working along the way. So that's just something we didn't get to build into the presentation, but that I wanted to mention.
Oh, that is so excellent to hear.